Welcome to the Action Network Podcast, UFC Betting Preview. I'm your host, Sean Zerillo, joined today by Billy Ward to help you break down the 13-fight card for UFC 316, giving you our best bets, favorite underdogs, top props, and more. And if you'd like to detail some of the bets that we discussed on today's show, make sure to find the quick slip links both in the podcast and the video description, or go to actionnetwork.com/bet now. The main event, bantamweight title bout between Merab Dvalishvili, minus 270 on the money line, and Sean O'Malley at plus 230. The first fight closed as a pick'em. Merab was plus 105. The first fight also closed around a pick'em to go to a decision at minus 110. As I said, Merab around minus 270, and the goes to decision line also around the same price, about minus 260 in this rematch. Should also mention Sean O'Malley plus 200 to win by KO in the first fight, now plus 575 in the rematch after the money line adjustment. O'Malley moving from about 33% implied to win by KO to about 18% implied. So very substantial adjustments both to the money line and the goes to decision props. Now, by pride rules, Merab undoubtedly won the first fight. I would say won 85%, 90% of the minutes in that first fight. But by round scoring, realistically, he was only a few strikes away in round one for O'Malley from losing that decision and having Sean retain the title. Now, watching it back, I just watched the entire fight back this morning. I really thought Merab won the first 4 rounds, thought O'Malley won round 5 with those teep kicks where he hurt Merab, but based upon how the judges scored it, round 2, or I should say round 3 was very close. Round 2 and round 4 were very obvious for Merab. And really, what I should point out, saying a few strikes away in round 1 from stealing the fight, Merab didn't grapple for the first 2.5 minutes of the fight. He was feeling Sean out, trying to get, a feel for the distance, which allowed Sean to be competitive for the first 2.5 minutes. But the moment Merab initiated a takedown, it changed the entire dynamic of the fight. O'Malley scrambled up from that takedown, but then Merab landed a right hand, which was probably his biggest punch that he landed the entire fight. So the takedown dynamics, the grappling dynamics just changed the way that this fight is going to go. I should also mention Merab was pressuring O'Malley back for the entire fight. Anytime he got his foot behind the black line, he initiated the takedown. And then anytime Sean tried to step up in the pocket and actually fight back or look to push Merab back, Merab initiated a reactive takedown. And those were the more vital takedowns, because when Sean was taken down in the middle of the cage, he was not able to get up nearly as easily as when he was taken down near the fence, able to scramble back up to his feet. So I do think, given the price adjustment, given how the first fight played out, given the likelihood that Sean could still land a knockdown or hurt Merab, have the bigger moments, and keep it competitive despite getting taken down, I actually do think there is value on Sean O'Malley's money line. I would project him closer to about plus 180. I made Merab a slight favorite in the first fight. I think you can take about 10% off in the rematch. But I do think the value side is Sean O'Malley. I would look to bet O'Malley pre-fight and then probably bet Merab live after round 1 or round 2, assuming it's going to be 1-1 after those first couple of rounds, or at least O'Malley can steal one of the first couple of rounds. The alternative way I would consider betting this is O'Malley on the point spread, plus 5.5 at minus 135. I think he can lose a 48-47 decision, but I also give him more finishing upside of the pair as well. So O'Malley on the point spread, plus 5.5. Don't love laying the juice there, though. And then pre-fight money line into a Merab live bet. Billy, I'll have the preview for this one out on actionnetwork.com. I know you don't have as many solidified thoughts on betting this fight, which is why I went ahead and took over the preview. But give me what thoughts you do have on O'Malley versus Merab, whether you're considering live betting this one, and then any betting possibilities that come to mind for you.
Yeah, I'll start with the live betting angle. If you ever, in any fight, get a better price on Merab at any point than you did pre-fight, you should probably just live bet it. Like, it's not... I'm not confident that'll even happen, but, like, if you get it, great. Like, by all means, take that. Like, you should never look that gift horse in the mouth. The argument I'm hearing for O'Malley is that he was injured going into the last fight, right? But there's two parts to that. One, like, who's to say he's not injured with something else now? Like, he's kind of a big, lanky dude. They tend to be less durable. Like, we see more injuries in guys with that build than we do guys built like Merab. It's just how the sport works for whatever reason. But the other thing is he had a hip surgery less than 9 months ago. So I have no idea how long that takes to recover from exactly, but I would imagine 3-4 months at a minimum before you're like really training again. So how much improvement can we bank on seeing from him when he wasn't training at full strength for, half of the time since Merab last fought him? And Merab just continues to look better and better in every fight. Like, I was blown away at the Nurmagomedov win. I thought stylistically that would be the toughest fight he'd ever have, and Merab just kind of rolled through it without many problems. So that is what is keeping me from betting O'Malley. What is keeping me from betting Merab at the current price? One, he says he wants to go out and show his striking. I don't put a lot of faith in that, especially with how silly Merab is just as a human in general. But like, you don't love to hear that. Like, please don't do that, Merab. Just go grapple. And then the other part of it is you can obviously get a better price on Merab 4-5 decision, Merab by decision. Like, there's just his early stoppage equity is so low that it's really hard to see any reason to bet anything like that. He doesn't even really attempt submissions. That's the other thing. We think of him as this elite grappler, and he is, but he averages like one submission attempt every 3 fights. So it's not really and sometimes those are scored when they weren't really trying that hard to get a submission too. So I just don't see any reason to bet the money line on Merab. I like the late angles. I like live, assuming we get a better price. And O'Malley by KO is interesting, right? Like, this could be a rematch or a replay of the Aljamain Sterling fight. That wouldn't shock me. I don't see him winning a decision, though, especially in New Jersey. I think the judges will be a little bit friendlier to Merab because I thought it was some pretty friendly judging towards O'Malley in the first one. With that said, I like your point spread angle because around where O'Malley lands 3 or 4 good punches and Merab just kind of wrestles him from the top is hard to score. So I can see that angle too, but probably nothing from me pre-fight. Might get in on Merab live if such an opportunity presents itself.
Yeah, surprised that this rematch is happening. But that said, I should reflect upon the difference in public perception of these two fighters relative to where they were previously. O'Malley was being picked to win the first fight 60, 65, 70% of the time. Merab, I feel like, is a fighter who the public has fallen in love with. The more he's won, the more he's competed. Kissing O'Malley on the back in the headlock at the end of round 2. I should mention, your point regarding the submission attempts. Merab's submission attempts really come with 15 or 20 seconds left in the round. He'll get a guy down, he'll put them in the headlock, and then he'll kind of hold onto the headlock. Maybe, look for a Darce, but not really as the round expires. So those submission attempts are coming with 10 or 15 seconds left in the round, basically just to put a stamp on it. But I do think the way the public perception on these two is shifted is really interesting because Merab's a guy I've been betting on forever, going back to I can't even think of the guys he was fighting earlier in his career in the division who are no longer even in the UFC anymore.
Terry Ware, Gustavo Lopez, Brad Katona is now back, but he was part of the original Brad Katona run. Guys like that.
There's a former flyweight I'm thinking of, very fast guy with big power.
John Dodson.
Yes, John Dodson. I mean, I was thinking, like, I couldn't think of the fight. Yeah, John Dodson denied like all 18 takedown attempts in that fight. Merab just kind of held him up the fence like he did against Aldo for the whole fight. So Merab's never, or I should say Merab didn't used to have the most exciting style. He wasn't able to get guys to the ground as consistently as it seems like he is able to now. He was much more fighting against the fence, clinching guys up, kneeing them in the back of the legs. He really beat Sean up on the ground. He was getting him down on the ground or getting him up against the fence and then just throwing knees to the thigh, throwing knees to the body. Like, he was much more violent against O'Malley and in the clinch than I think he was previously. But I just want to go back to the public perception thing. I feel like now everybody loves Merab, and the love for O'Malley has sort of faded away. I bet against O'Malley virtually every fight. I've never come on this podcast and said I'm betting Sean O'Malley. I bet O'Malley when he was fighting in the Apex against guys with no names to knock them out as a minus 500 favorite. Once he's actually fought and stepped up against real competition, I've basically been betting against O'Malley every fight because I feel like he's typically overvalued and he's picked at too high of a percentage by the public predictions I use to incorporate into my projections. I feel like this fight, he's being picked to win about 20% of the time and well below where the market expects him to be. So I find that dynamic, that shift in public perception very interesting. I don't know if it's solely because Merab won the first fight or just off the hip surgery, Sean not able to knock him out. He's sort of lost his star power a little bit. Billy, I want to ask you, though, before we move on from this fight, how have I know you've done research into this into the past, or done research into this in the past. the difference between fighters rematching in title fights versus fighters getting an immediate rematch in a title fight. Don't the champions or don't the fight is, I believe the fighter who won the first fight, don't they win the second fight at like an 80% plus clip?
Yeah. The two that are the most predictive with like enough of a sample size to actually care about are the first fighter tends to win at a better than market rate, as does the younger fighter, which is partially why I didn't mention this, is because that obviously cancels out with O'Malley being 4-ish years younger. I think most of that is based on rematches way down the line, though, because if you're 5 or 6 years older than me and we fight when I'm 22, and then again when I'm 29 or whatever, like then we're on opposite parts of the curve in terms of the prime. And when it's an immediate rematch, I would imagine that the age part of it doesn't matter all that much. Like how much I don't have it that granular where I can break that out, but how much worse did Merab get in the last 9 months? Probably not considerably. And even if O'Malley would have gotten better based on his age, missing all that time with an injury probably cancels that out. So I'm not looking too much into those, just because the two that I rely on the most more or less cancel out, but also like I think there's some extenuating circumstance with it being so quick.
Well, last point, don't think it'll ultimately matter, but Merab is coming in with a toe injury to this fight. He said he's just going to go ahead and cut the toe off and fight with it. I don't think it ultimately matters for him. The guy's such an animal, but yeah, the first fight wasn't particularly exciting watching it back. O'Malley, as I said, wasn't really all that competitive for most of it. He had some big moments, which swung rounds in his favor, but really a fight that should not be happening. I'm surprised O'Malley wasn't forced to fight somebody else in the top 3 before getting a rematch. UFC doesn't want to lose his potential star power. They're just going to go ahead and give him another title shot. I don't think it's necessarily deserved, but that said, I do think he is the value side on the money line. We'll move on to our fight of the night, the women's bantamweight title match between Juliana Pena, who's coming in as a plus 550 underdog, against Kayla Harrison. Pena, the biggest standing champion underdog odds, aside from Nico Montano, who lost to Valentina Shevchenko. I believe Montano was around a plus 800 underdog against Shevchenko. So Juliana may be getting a little bit disrespected here as the current champion, fighting Kayla Harrison, who used to compete at 155, probably should be competing at 145, and is forced to cut down to 135 because that is the division the UFC has essentially eliminated their women's featherweight division. Billy, I believe you are taking the cardio angle against Harrison, given the weight cut. I kind of like this fight to go all 25 minutes. I like Pena's durability. If it does end inside the distance, I think it's likely Harrison via submission. I think you lean more towards Harrison via KO with the ground and pound. But give me your breakdown on this fight, whether you plan on live betting it at some point on Juliana Pena, and what pre-fight ticket you're going in as well.
Yeah, real quick, I'm going to diverge slightly. Nico Montano won the flyweight title in December 1st, 2017. That event, also the UFC debut of a young Sean O'Malley. So just to tie everything together here, on the Sean O'Malley was in the co-main, won a decision where he got 3 takedowns per UFC stats, which I do not remember him landing 3 takedowns collectively in his career, but it apparently happened at one point. Back to the topic at hand. Yeah, it's an interesting fight. Pena, and I don't mean this as disrespectfully as it's going to sound, but from a skill standpoint, might be the worst UFC champion possibly ever. What she's good at is being like stubborn and durable and tough. Like she's in theory a jiu-jitsu based fighter, but she's a brown belt and has been submitted as many times as she's gotten submissions. And her win over Rocky Pennington to win this title, pretty controversial split decision. I didn't think she won it. The other one, outside of just saying it was a fluke where Nunez underestimated her, it was kind of like the Homer Simpson strategy where she just let Amanda tire herself out by beating on her and managed to stick around and then come back in the second round. If Pena's going to win, I think she has to do something like that here. Like, she's maybe a slightly better technical striker than Kayla Harrison, but that is more than outweighed by the athleticism difference between the two of them. And with Harrison, I am concerned, though, because this is her first 5-round bantamweight fight, and it's her first time making championship weight, which she did. I mean, she was 135 on the dot, one of the first people to weigh in. It was a little bit of a weird weigh-in, though, because a lot of fighters were right on the dot despite coming in late. And there's a great gif of Mario Bautista floating around where he looked very surprised. They said he weighed 135 pounds. So I'm not sure if maybe the scale was off a little bit or the commission was just giving people an extra pound. I don't know. regardless, it's a big cut for Kayla Harrison. She didn't look great down the stretch in her last fight against Ketlin Vieira to get to this fight. So I think Kayla Harrison is going to win, though, but I'm worried about her late. That gives me Kayla Harrison in the first 3 rounds. That is even money. Was plus 115 when I wrote the article about it, but still at even money. I think that's most of her win condition is going to be that early part of the fight. She could obviously submit Pena. She throws her. I'm a little bit interested in Harrison by knockout because she's been pretty aggressive with the ground and pound when she gets takedowns. And then the other angle I'm looking at is either Juliana Pena live, which after about 2 rounds could be plus 2,000 or just something absurd if Kayla comes out hard. Or Pena in the decision only market is plus 350, which I think is something that you might be a little bit interested in. If you told me this goes all 25 minutes, I would make this money line a lot closer. So by that logic, the decision only on Pena. To be clear, if you're watching this live, I prefer the live angles, but if you're worried about getting down live or unable or just annoying to do, which I understand, that's how I would take the Pena side. And then I think you could probably get pretty close to, and obviously you can't guarantee a profit. I think you're getting pretty close to covering both sides if you do Harrison first 3 rounds and then Pena in the decision only market.
As I said, I lean to the GTD here as well. 80% of women's bantamweight main events have gone to a decision. 61% of the 3-round fights in this division go to decision as well. I make this about plus 130. You're getting as high as plus 175 for this fight to go all 25 minutes. I made Harrison by decision plus 190 compared to listed odds of plus 230. I also do show a slight edge on Pena's decision prop as well. And given the cardio dynamic, I'd rather bet this fight GTD, especially at plus 175 compared to plus 230 on Harrison, rather than picking one of the fighters to win by decision. So GTD or pass for me, probably a quarter unit play there, nothing too substantial, but have to bet into the odds relative to the divisional average of the goes to the decision prop. And, Pena obviously concerns about the submission defense, but I think she is super durable and will fight for your money, will fight to stay alive in this matchup. Let's move on to our favorite underdogs on this card. The fighter you just mentioned, my favorite underdog, maybe even my favorite bet on the card is Mario Bautista, as high as plus 170 this morning. I saw at Caesars. He's my biggest projected edge on this card. I made him plus 118 in this fight against Patchy Mix, former Bellator champion. Engaged to Tatiana Suarez, a very good grappler, not because he's engaged to Tatiana Suarez, but they are going to produce, I would imagine, some very good grappling babies at some point. Now, Bautista, I think, is the better striker of the pair, and I also think he has much better cardio. When Mix fought Rafion Stotts in Bellator for the Bellator Grand Prix, my angles in that fight were to bet Stotts live, because I do not think Mix has the best cardio. He can grapple, he's powerful, but I do think he fades after round 1, and I think Bautista is going to have a path to beating him by decision and to working his way back into the fight in the 2nd and 3rd round. Mix may get an immediate title shot if he wins this matchup, despite Bautista not having the biggest name, but Bautista is on a nice winning streak. I believe his last win came over Jose Aldo. A bit controversial. Also didn't fight the most exciting fight stylistically, mostly spent time holding Aldo up against the cage, like Merab did, for that matter. But I do think Patchy either needs a submission or he needs extensive control time in order to cover his money line and win this fight. Otherwise, I expect Bautista to land more volume and to steal a decision down the stretch. So I bet Bautista pre-fight to plus 125, and I also think you might find a better live number after round 1. Billy, this is my favorite fight on the card. This is my favorite fight of the card. Forget the main event, forget the co-main event. My favorite fight on the card, Patchy Mix against Mario Bautista. Any bets for you here?
Yeah, I'm really struggling with this one. If this were a 5-round fight, which I wish it was like a, UFC Atlanta main event rather than on this card, I would 100% be with you on Bautista. Mix's only career losses, I believe, are both 5-round, or he only has the one career loss. Yeah, and it was a 5-rounder. That cardio angle, I don't worry quite as much with a 135-pounder in a 3-round fight. Like, you got to be real bad cardio-wise for that to be an issue given the weight class. With that said, Bautista could do the Jose Aldo fight here. The Jose Aldo fight here, and that's probably his best path to victory. So while I'm excited and intrigued by it, like there's a very high chance this ends up a very frustrating fight, which would be good for Mario Bautista. I like how much more dynamic Mix is, and if he gets, we're seeing the price come down a little bit. I'm very interested in him. probably more interested in him for DFS than betting, just because if he does win, as you pointed out, it's going to be a lot of takedowns or a finish, where Bautista could easily win an extremely boring fight here, and we wouldn't be surprised. So no bet for me now, but it is one of my favorite fights. And yeah, Bautista live, if that line blows out, I don't have a problem with that. It makes a lot of sense. I'm just not sure that we'll necessarily get the better line without him getting finished in the process.
One consensus underdog that we have on this card, Mark Chowinski against Markel Medeiros. It's actually Choinsky. I was watching his last regional fight, and they kept saying Choinsky, and I was like, that looks like it should be not pronounced Chowinski, but I'm going to say Choinsky because that's what the fight announcers were saying. Markel Medeiros, too sick to fight last week. He put on Instagram that he had to withdraw from his fight because he was sick. Now he's flying cross country. He's had to cut weight twice, and he was the last fighter to get to the scales on Friday, which I would say that factor alone probably pretty concerning, considering he had to pull out of his fight last week. Again, flying cross country, completely changing venues. That is quite a toll to have on your body. Now he is getting a short notice opponent in Mark Choinsky, but Choinsky had a fight booked for next week. So I would imagine he was in camp prepping for that fight, has faced pretty low level competition fighting in the Anthony Pettis FC regional promotion, but he does train with the Pettis Bros in that gym, also trains with Raytheon Stotts, who I just mentioned. It is a reasonably good MMA gym. I'm sorry, go ahead.
C-Rod out there too, another good around that size guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think, he's training with reasonable guys, despite the fact that he's fought pretty low-level competition, and this guy can wrestle. He was a former 3-time D3 All-American wrestler. He throws hard on the feet. He has very bad striking defense, so I do worry about him getting clipped, but he's never been KO'd. Has shown good durability. I do think he's going to get hit hard by Medeiros, but I like the way he checks leg kicks. So if he can check Medeiros' leg kicks and then get on top, initiate some takedowns, get to the back, control from there, I do think Choinsky has all of the grappling upside at plus 170. I also like this fight to go to a decision. I projected that line at about minus 155. So Choinsky Medeiros goes to decision, and also Choinsky on the money line at plus 170. I projected the GTD line at minus 190. You can bet it at minus 155. And then lastly, obviously correlated value on Choinsky to win by decision at plus 440. I made that line plus 305. So, Billy, are you just playing Choinsky on the money line here? And how did you evaluate this one breaking down the tape?
Yeah, I think you hit pretty much everything I was going to say. The sickness was the big factor that first got me into that. But then you see the guy's a D3 wrestler. The only thing you didn't mention, I think, is that Medeiros was taken down twice and controlled for 7.5 minutes by Austin Hubbard in his last fight. And Choinsky is, at the very least, a much better wrestler than that. Like, I don't know. It's hard to find a ton of tape on him. And even the tape you find is fighting guys that doesn't really tell you too much. I would be very confident in saying that if we put some singlets and ear guards on Austin Hubbard and Mark Choinsky, the Choinsky would come out on top. So we've got that going for us. Yeah, just a straight up money line. I wish I would have got it sooner because he was north of 2-1 earlier in the week. But then this is another one where I believe I have Choinsky in 100% of my DFS lineups this week. Like, it's really hard to find cheap guys, and I'm absolutely in love with him there. So I would probably come up with some other angles if I weren't so exposed to him in a different way. Gonna suck, if, as you pointed out, that striking defense fails him. But I think he's a great play with the wrestling. And yeah, I'm really into this one. You hit all the bases.
Let's get into Billy's Underdog Plays for this week, and you can go yard all season long with Underdog's Pick'em game. Underdog is one of the leading sports apps, and you can play now in your state. Millions of fans have already won billions making picks on Underdog. Will you be next? To play, all you have to do is download the app and choose whether a player will go higher or lower on one of their stats. You can choose from things like home runs, strikeouts, total bases, and so much more. Once your picks feel good, you can play with as little as $1, and if you get everything right, you can win up to 1,000 times your money. Since we're talking UFC today, Billy, what are you cooking up for Underdog for hires and lowers this weekend?
Yeah, I'm looking at a fight that we are both in consensus on. I'm going to talk about with our props, and that is Vicente Luque versus Kevin Holland. I want Holland lower than 46.5 significant strikes. Vicente Luque has been knocked out badly a couple times here. I don't think he could take 47 significant strikes and remain conscious. So that one makes it pretty easy because, even if Holland is landing a bunch of strikes, I don't think he gets to that number. And then on the flip side, also, Vicente Luque lower than 38.5 significant strikes. Hard to land significant strikes of your own if you are unconscious, which is what I think is going to happen in this fight fairly shortly. Love that we can do this from Underdog, where we take both sides of the same fight. There's some really fun ways to build around that. That is the one I'm looking at this week. You can join me by downloading the Underdog app and signing up with promo code Action Network to unlock a special offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you make your first deposit. Again, that is promo code Action Network. Must be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, and 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply, void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. And in New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. And Sean, we're getting into the props. I mentioned the first fight that we're in agreement on. Tell me why you like Kevin Holland by knockout.
Yeah, Luque's loss against Joaquin Buckley remains extremely concerning and very awkward. Now, we've heard in the past about him having a brain bleed, doctors telling him to stop fighting. And then in that Buckley fight, he just kind of turtled up and let the fight end. Came back up, won, his next fight, but primarily through grappling. Really didn't spend much time at distance. So, to your point about playing the lower on Underdog on Luque's significant strikes, if he's going to win here, it's probably going to be through grappling and either submitting Kevin Holland or in some way getting on top of Holland and holding him down. We've seen Luque in the past out-grapple guys. That said, we've also discussed, Billy, the difference between middleweight Kevin Holland and welterweight Kevin Holland. And this is welterweight Kevin Holland here, 4 inches taller, 6-inch reach advantage, one of the most efficient, significant strikers in the history of this promotion. It's conceivable that Luque grapples. I think Holland's defensive grappling tends to get underrated, not his defensive wrestling, which does get underrated at 170 pounds, but his overall defensive jiu-jitsu. I think he's very competent in terms of his jiu-jitsu abilities. I expect him, if Luque does land a takedown, I expect Holland to scramble back to his feet. And I do think within a matter of 40 significant strikes or less, Kevin Holland would knock out Vicente Luque at some point. So, yeah, I think just Luque could be completely washed at this point. Obviously, He came back and won his last fight. But really, since that knockout loss against Jeff Neal, I don't think he's been the same fighter. And I think he had the brain bleed issue even before that. So I projected Holland's KO line at about plus 150. I would bet that down to plus 160. And I also like the fight to end inside the distance as well. Just I put more of that equity on Holland. I think Luque would probably win more of a control-based wrestling decision if he does win. But even with that, I don't think he's landing many significant strikes. So any other thoughts that you had on the fight aside from the ones that you're to give out?
Yeah, I'm less worried, I think, than the grappling even than you are. And here's why. Luque has 7 submissions between the UFC and the Ultimate Fighter. I don't know if we're going to count that. All 7 of those are either Anaconda or Darce chokes, which are effectively the same choke. A bunch of jiu-jitsu people are going to yell at me for saying that. It's the same choke. It's just a different arm that goes in first. Almost all of those are because his opponent shot, which is like the only position you can do those from. Again, that's not 100% true. Don't yell at me, jiu-jitsu nerds, but that is a thing. Kevin Holland's not going to shoot on Vicente Luque. Why would he do that? He knows better than that. So even the win against Themba Gorimbo took like a bad shot because Luque hit him, which put him in position to get Anaconda choked. Kevin Holland's not gonna. Like, Kevin Holland will occasionally take you down and then realize his mistake and let you up, even though he should win the fight from there. So that makes me feel a little bit better than that. In addition to the Kevin Holland KO, I also like the under 1.5 at plus 148. The only way I see Luque winning it is if Kevin Holland gets clipped and then kind of falls into a submission like that, which I think is more likely early than late. I don't think Luque has the wrestling to really control him to a decision. So my logic there, if we get a Holland knockout in the first half of the fight, we win both bets. Something else happens early, we still make a profit on both. I have the full preview up on actionnetwork.com for this fight where I went a little bit more in depth on that, but we're seeing it pretty much the same way.
Yeah, I was misremembering when the RDA fight for Luque took place. That was before the Joaquin Buckley fight. His only fight, as you said, since the Buckley knockout, the very awkward Buckley finish. He fought Themba Gorimbo for 55 seconds. Everybody bet Luque in that fight. At least it seemed like everybody sharp bet Luque in that fight. Big plus money. He ended up getting the finish, but that fight did not play out at all. We did not really see him get hit. Don't really know still how he's going to respond to actually taking damage. So I think Holland KO might be quick and might look like free money this week. And it's very possible. I'm not saying it's guaranteed, but if that does hit, I think it might be quick and it might look free. Let's move on to another fight that I like quite a bit from a prop perspective. That's Sergey Spivak, who's minus 130 against Waldo Cortez Acosta at plus 110. I think Spivak's moved closer to minus 140 this morning. I do kind of like him on the money line. I projected him closer to minus 150, but I also like this fight to end inside the distance, and I prefer the Spivak side of things if it is going to end inside the distance. Waldo did look bigger on the scales. He's about 15 pounds heavier, but I still think Spivak is the more natural heavyweight of the two. Waldo just seems like a blown up guy in general. Former baseball player. Spivak, has much more of a decorated grappling history. And Waldo, the one time he faced a grappler in the UFC was Marcos Rogério de Lima, basically got stuck on his back for the entire fight. He was able to put Rebeles de Spain on his back for the entire fight, meaning Waldo. But when he's the one actually getting grappled, I really don't think he's able to offer any resistance. He's also not training at a particularly prestigious gym where I think he's likely to make improvements to that part of his game. So heavyweights in general, I feel like tend to develop a little bit slower. I don't think Waldo has the defensive grappling to stop Sergey from getting the positions he wants to. As I said, Sergey on the money line at about minus 140, but I make his sub prop about 2-1. You can bet that at plus 360. And I make his inside the distance line about plus 113. You can bet that at plus 180. So Spivak inside the distance, maybe the money line as well. Billy, what are your thoughts on this fight?
Yeah, I took Spivak straight up. I've mentioned it in the past that there's almost two different heavyweight divisions where there's like 7 or 8 guys who are legitimately that size and have UFC level skills. And then there's the rest of the guys that just fill cards or let Tom Aspinall knock them out in 12 seconds or whatever. And Salsa Boy has exclusively fought in that latter group. Like, if you look at the name of his win, it's hilarious. Some of the guys: Jared Vandera, Chase Sherman, Lucas Bresky, 80-year-old Andrei Arlovsky, Robelis Despania, the Taekwondo fighter who went 1 and whatever in the UFC, and then Ryan Spann, who is a light heavyweight coming up and probably shouldn't have done that, are the list of his wins. Spivak's resume isn't as great in terms of wins and losses, but he's fought Cyril Gane, Marcin Tybura, Jailton Almeida, choked out Derek Lewis. Like, he's lost to Tom Aspinall. Like, he's fought all the top-ranked UFC heavyweights and been okay. And he's somehow 3 years younger because he didn't spend the early part of his athletic career as a single-A baseball player. So, yeah, I can't believe these lines are this close. I took minus 135 on Spivak. I'm with you. Anything up to about minus 150 or so. I like the sub angle, but, like, would it shock you if he just knocked him out pretty fast? Because Cortez Acosta throws a lot of punches, but he's not like a technical striker. Like, he just does volume. So, also, he lost to Andrei Arlovsky. I don't care what the official record says. Those are the end of my thoughts on Salsa Boy. Shout out to him for being able to build a 6-1 UFC record without actually being that great at fighting. But here we are.
Another fight on the card that you're targeting from a prop perspective before I get to my final one, Juseng Yu against Jega Sergey. You've got an alternative nickname that you want to give to Juseng Yu, but you've also got a way that you want to bet on him this weekend.
Yeah, his official nickname is Zombie Jr. because he trains with the Korean Zombie, which is awesome. Terrible. But I think his nickname should be the Bear, and we just put that in front of his name, so then he can be Paul Craig Jr. Let you guys say that one out loud and figure out how we get there. I like you in rounds 1 or 2 at minus 120 at Jeka Saragi. I've heard it said both ways.
Saragi,
I don't know. Jeka. I will say the Zombie Jr. nickname is appropriate because I watched some tape on you, and he just marches forward throwing bombs. His last fight, he won in like 75 seconds, but managed to get himself rocked a couple times in there. But much like the original Korean Zombie, like all these Korean fighters just seem to have granite chins, heavy hands, and like zero interest in striking defense, which is also kind of how Sergey fights, but much worse athlete, less durability, and less power. These guys are just going to trade. They're just going to throw real hard. I think Yu gets it done. He's a huge favorite. And obviously, if we expect to finish, it's likely to happen sooner rather than later. So I like that. I like Yu by knockout. The only reason I didn't take Yu by knockout, and this is hilarious to talk about grammatically because it seems like I'm saying Sean Zerillo is fighting tomorrow in Newark. But the only reason I didn't take Yu by knockout is that Sergey has struggled on the ground so much that it wouldn't shock me to see a club and sub or get him against the fence and just kind of throw him down. I'm actually pretty high on you as a prospect. Very athletic. Would like to see him ever defend strikes, but at worst, he'll be like a fun guy to have around, even if he doesn't challenge the top of the rankings.
You're high on me as a prospect? That's very nice of you to say,
Yeah,
Billy.
very high.
Let's talk about one more fight from a prop perspective. Ariana Da Silva, used to be Ariana Lipski, going against Wang Kong. You'll find Ariana listed as Ariana Lipski in some places, Ariana Da Silva in others. Same fighter, just had a name change, but she did miss weight by 6 pounds on Friday. We do not have official confirmation yet that this fight will continue to go on. I'd imagine Wang Kong will happily accept the fight. If you're going to come in with your face painted like the Joker, you can't cancel a fight over a 6 pound weight miss. But this division does have a decision rate on average of 68% across 3-round fights. You're getting decent odds here. I think right around a pick'em for this fight to go to a decision. Lipski, to me, she did get finished on the feet by Priscilla Cachoeira. She ate some big punches, but generally, I do find she's getting finished when she's getting out grappled by opponents via ground and pound. You see a lot of knockouts on her record. Typically, those are TKOs that are coming with her back flat on the mat. I think these two probably strike it out for 15 minutes unless Lipski is the one who's able to land takedowns. She does have some good offensive submission skills of her own. She just tends to get outworked when she's the one stuck on bottom. So GTD between Ariana Da Silva and Kong Wang at about minus 115 in the women's flyweight division, compared, as I said, to a divisional average of about 68% and minus 212 implied. These are both violent fighters. Will not be surprised if this one ends via finish. Just have to bet this line compared to the divisional average, which is more than 10% above where the line is set. Billy, any thoughts on Da Silva against Wang Kong?
Yeah, until the weight miss, I thought this was going to be a closer fight than the betting line implies, but 6 pounds is a lot, especially with how generous the scales seem to be to other fighters, because she might have actually missed by 7 or 8 based on everybody else's reaction. So I'm staying away from it, and partially because I'm not entirely sure this fight still happens. So I like your angle. I almost bet Lipski, Da Silva, whatever we're calling her, early in the week, just because it did seem like an outsized line. I don't think Wang Kong is as good as she is fun, if that makes sense. Like, she does her whole Joker thing. We all got excited because she knocked out Victoria Leonardo in the first round of her UFC debut, but that's Victoria Leonardo who went, I don't know, like 1-4 in the promotion and got finished by everybody. So don't put too much faith in that. I think this will actually be a closer fight than the money line implies, if Lipski isn't totally drained or the fight gets canceled or didn't train at all, and that's why she's overweight. There's just too many factors.
Yeah, it was just a memorable knockout. Like, the sound physically of the impact, it looked like a civilian fighting a professional fighter. Like, that's legitimately what it would look like.
It was, though.
Yeah,
like, because it actually
really
was.
Yes, but yeah, it was a memorable knockout in terms of the impact. I think Kong only has 3 knockouts in 18 career fights. Like, this is still the women's flyweight division. Like, you have to recognize that the power and the relative power of these fighters really only produces finishes at a 30% clip. And even if you're going to say Kong is a substantial finisher relative to the rest of the division, what is she still? Like 40% likely to finish a fight, 45% likely. So getting the GTD at minus 115, I think, is a fair price. We have 2 bets on one fight in terms of our best bets for this weekend's card. I believe the outcomes are very correlated to one another as well. I'm sure Billy would agree with that too. That's the Joe Pyfer Kelvin Gastelum fight. I like the fight to go to decision. Billy is taking a bit riskier of a spot on Gastelum on the money line. I'll just say my piece first. This divisional average, or I should say this division goes to decision on 45% clip on average. However, given the durability of both fighters, I have this one at about 57% or minus 130. I would bet this up to minus 120. You can get plus money currently on this to reach a decision. I think most of it just comes down to, does Joe Pyfer submit Kelvin Gastelum or not? Because I think Gastelum is extremely durable. I think Pyfer is extremely durable, but Pyfer is bigger than Gastelum. If he's able to get on top and submit him, I think that's the likeliest way that this one ends inside the distance. Gastelum has been submitted 3 times, but typically by better grapplers than what I perceive. Pyfer very dangerous in round 1. I think his cardio does tend to slip a little bit in rounds 2 and round 3. Obviously lost that 5-round decision to Jack Hermanson that we were both on. I think he has enough cardio to sustain for 15 minutes, but I think Gastelum has a path to winning this fight in rounds 2 and rounds 3. So pre-fight goes to decision for me, and then I'll be targeting Gastelum live after round 1. Billy's going to have a pre-fight bet on Gastelum. Tell me what you saw in this matchup, Billy. And I'd imagine you're looking for a live number after round 1 as well.
Yeah, 100%. I should be clear that I moved this to my best bet just so we could both talk about the same fight. If I had a gun to my head, I think Troinski would probably be my actual best bet on the card. Although by the time you listen to this, the line might have dropped enough that that's not true. But I digress. Yeah, I don't understand Gastelum as a 3-1 underdog here. He's just fought much, much better competition than Joe Pyfer. Joe Pyfer's best attribute is his one-punch knockout power. And like scientists are still debating if it's even possible for Kelvin Gastelum to be knocked out because it's never happened. The only person ever to drop him was like a prime Israel Adesanya who was just, mauling people. And Gastelum made it to the end through 5 rounds of getting struck by Israel Adesanya. I don't see Joe Pyfer putting him away early. And if Joe Pyfer tries to put him away early, Joe Pyfer will be very tired. Not a guy with great cardio. I wish this fight had happened in Mexico City where it was supposed to, because Pyfer would have been cooked after like 6 minutes in that one. Here at, normal altitude, I'm not as worried about that. But yeah, love Kelvin Gastelum at 3-1 underdog. Think he dominates the latter portion of this fight. I'm not sure it's enough if he loses the early round to like come back and to come back and take over on the decision. But yeah, also Kelvin Gastelum live. If he does lose that first round, we could get 5 or 6-1. So that's a great bet as well.
A fighter we were going to bet last week who got rebooked for this week, Alexander Gustafsson, is fighting Kalen Chaos Williams. You like Williams here considering the stylistic matchup. You mentioned some things last week about Gustafsson's ceiling and the type of fighter he might have issue with. We both like Gustafsson a lot in the Apex just because that does lend itself to his fighting style. Now fighting in a bigger cage against a longer, very powerful opponent who can probably deny the takedowns or at least get himself out of the clinch with pure strength. You think Williams is probably the side in this fight, or at least you would not be betting on Gustafsson at dog odds, correct?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that one. I've gone back and forth. I said a couple days ago when we were talking that I was confident in Chaos. The only concern I have is that Gustafsson's style is so specific to him. Like, there's not a lot of Greco or Judo people in MMA these days. That's someone I would want a full camp to prepare for. And Williams has had like 3 or 4 different opponents on 2 different events by the time we're getting to this one. So it's not like he was training specifically for Gustafsson. Where I view Gustafsson as a guy, he's going to do the same thing no matter who he's fighting. He's going to throw really hard. If it doesn't knock you out, hopefully get a clinch and get a takedown. So that is, at least at the time, keeping me away from Chaos. I do think it's about the worst matchup stylistically for Gustafsson, though. Love this one for DFS because Williams struggles when he gets grappled. Both guys hit really hard. I think it's a bad stylistic matchup. Like, I think we're going to get a lot of DFS points from the winner of this one. I'm just not quite confident enough in who the winner is going to be to pick a side on it.
One other fight, I want to mention the flyweight bout between Bruno Silva and Josh Van. I do think this money line is getting a little bit wide. Josh Van is much younger. I'd expect him to take over the fight in the second and third rounds, but Bruno Silva is a very well-rounded, talented fighter, and he's coming off of a loss against Manel Kape where he was obviously outclassed, but he did put his foot on the gas pedal and put himself in danger trying to get anything and trying to finish that fight. It's a bunch of nice wins in the UFC. I believe he started out with a 3-fight losing streak and then ended up rallying back with a 4-fight winning streak. Obviously, that loss to Kape was expected. He was also a very big dog in that fight, but I think he's going to have opportunities to hit Josh Van, who is very hittable. Van, a very good offensive fighter, but I think leaves himself open defensively. And also, I think Silva is going to have a chance to potentially finish this fight via submission in round 1 if he's able to get the grappling going at all. Big age gap, as I said, between these two. Van should take over in the second and third rounds. I probably like Van to win by round 2 or round 3 knockout, but the money line to me is quite wide considering Silva's skill set. I feel like he's being viewed as a guy who's completely washed, when in fact, I think he's still a very skilled and dangerous fighter. Do you have any thoughts on that fight, Billy? And then any other thoughts on any other fights before we get out of here?
I do. I really like that read. I just think I would take the, plus 750, plus 800 or so on Silva to get a finish. It just seems, if he's going to win, I think that should be a bigger percentage. Josh Van throws with so much volume that you almost feel like any round that goes to the judges should just automatically go to him because he's going to hit you. Like, I think he's landing close to 9 significant strikes per minute in the UFC, which is Just insane. Bruno Silva.
Yeah,
averages
8.1 landed on
3.5.
54%. So he's attempting like 16 strikes a minute. That's great. 15 and a half. That's crazy.
Yeah. Like every 4 seconds, he's trying to hit you. Where Bruno Silva averages 3.54. So if he's not getting a finish, you know, you could also go finish only money line. I don't know what that is, but I like your read overall because Bruno Silva has huge power, and Josh Van got knocked out by Charles Johnson. So like I see it, but I just worry about judging.
Yeah, and they're the same size as well. Just the 11-year age gap, obviously concerning. I think Van round 2, round 3, probably how that one plays out. Van live after round 1 could be a good spot as well if that money line moves in. But that'll do it for a UFC betting preview. You can find more UFC betting content from both Billy and myself on actionnetwork.com. And remember, if you'd like to instantly tail some of the bets that we discussed on today's show, look for the Quip Link links both in the podcast and the video descriptions, or visit actionnetwork.com/bet now. Don't forget to download the free award-winning Action Network app and sign up for Action Pro for immediate access to expert picks and analysis. Best of luck with all your bets this weekend. Enjoy the violence. Thanks for listening. See you next time.